Hello everyone. Let's review shlokas 24 through 34 in Lalita Sahasranamam. Typically, we only review one or two shlokas, but this set of shlokas from 24 through 34 describe the war between Lalita and Bhaṇḍāsura. So it will be good to review them all together. And instead of looking at each shloka and understanding the meaning, we can try to look at that as a story between Lalita and Bhaṇḍāsura. So it's a story form. So let's first look at the shlokas. devarśhi gaṇasaṅghāta stūyamānāthma vaibhavā bhaṇḍāsura vadhodyukta śaktisenā samanvitā sampatkarī samārūḍha sindhura vrajasevitā aśhvārūḍhādhiśhṭhitāśva koṭikoṭi bhirāvṛtā chakrarāja rathārūḍha sarvāyudha pariśkṛtā geyachakra rathārūḍha mantriṇī parisevitā girichakhra rathārūḍha daṇḍanāthā puraskṛtā jvālāmālini kākśhipta vahniprākāra madhyagā bhaṇḍasainya vadhodyukta śaktivikramaharshita nitya parakramaṭopa nirikṣana samutsuka bhaṇḍaputra vadhodyukta bala vikramanandita mantriṇyamba virachita vishanga vadadoshita vishukraprāṇaharana vārahi vīryanandita kāmeshvara mukāloka kalpita shri ganeshvara mahaganesha nirbinna vignayantra praharshita bhaṇḍāsurendra nirmukta shastra pratyastra-varshini karangulina kotpanna narayana dashakritihi mahapāshupatastragni nirdagdāsura-sainika kāmeshvarastra nirdagda sabhaṇḍāsura-shunyaka brahmopendra mahendradi deva samstuta vaibhavā haranetragni sandagda kama sanjīvana ushadihi Srimad Vagbhava Kūtaika Swarupa Mukha Pankaja. Now let's look at the meanings. Actually, the shloka 24 starts with Lalita gathering her army to go fight with Bhaṇḍāsura. Let's take a brief look at the backstory and then we can look at the rest of it. So, the origin of Lalita starts with a story about Tarakasura. So there was once a demon called Tarakasura who had gotten a boon that he can only be killed by Shiva or son of Shiva. And once this demon got the boon, he became very arrogant because only Shiva could kill and or Shiva's son could kill. And at that time, Shiva was in a long penance. He had lost his wife Sati. Sati was the daughter of Daksha, and Daksha was having a yajna for which he did not invite Shiva, and she got very mad. She was also called Dakshayini. She got very mad and she jumped into the fire and she died, and Shiva was carrying her body around. And after a certain point, the body disintegrated and fell in many places. And then Shiva went off into a long penance. So Tarakasura was thinking, oh, Shiva is in a long penance. He doesn't have his wife anymore. So there is no way he can have a son, which means that he's essentially immortal. Nobody's going to kill him. So with that thought in his head, he became very arrogant and he started to torture everybody. And he conquered all three worlds and he was torturing everyone in all the three worlds. So the devas could not take this anymore. So they went to Brahma and said, Brahma, please tell us what is the way out of this situation, because now Shiva is continually in penance and only he or his son can kill Tarakasura, and this guy is getting atrocious day by day. And we can't bear this anymore. So what's the way out of this? So Brahma said, we have to wake Shiva up from his penance. And at that time, Parvati was born as the daughter of the mountain. So she was called Parvati or Gauri. And she was actually doing all the work around the place, keeping the place clean, helping bring the things for the puja and all that. But Shiva was continuously in the penance. He doesn't know anything around him, and he's constantly, praying in the tapas. But Gauri was there, and she was keeping everything running there. So they said, Gauri is there. Let's wake up Shiva from the penance, then he can have a son who can come and help us in this situation. So, how to wake up Shiva from the penance? Brahma said, let's ask Manmada to put the Cupid arrow on Shiva, which will wake him up from the penance. At the same time, he'll fall in love with Gauri or Parvati, and that will help us in our mission. So, Brahma explained this plan. All the devas bought into it. So, they all went to Manmada and asked for his help. And Manmada also thought that, he's helping with killing this Tarakasura, who's a menace for everybody. So, he also agreed to the plan. So, one day when Shiva was doing the tapas, Manmada stood behind, and from there he put the arrow. As soon as the arrow hit Shiva, his penance was disturbed and he opened his eyes. And when he opened his eyes, instead of falling in love with Gauri, he really got upset that somebody disturbed his penance. So Shiva is unpredictable in that way. And he was looking around for finding who disturbed his penance. And there he saw Manmada with the bow and arrow. So Shiva immediately thought, this is the guy who disturbed me. And Shiva got very mad and he opened his third eye and burnt Manmada down. When Manmada was burnt down, he became ashes. And all the devas and Brahma were all shocked by this outcome. They didn't expect this to happen. And so they all left the place. So now the ashes were all there. And there was a leader of the Ganas who actually made the ashes into a form of a boy. And Shiva now had been disturbed, so now he's not meditating anymore. After some time, his anger cooled down. And he thought about, why did Manmada do this? And then he realized that it was not Manmada's plan, rather it was Brahma and Devas who requested for his help. So Manmada really did not intend to disturb him. And Shiva felt sorry that he had burnt him down without thinking through. And he thought maybe, he should have held it back. And poor Manmada now was punished because of other people's plan. So with that thought, he looked at the ashes in a compassionate manner. And at that time, the ashes that was arranged in the form of a boy immediately sprang to life. So it took life. It was a small boy. And so everybody thought that was fortunate that the ashes could come to life. And so they all said Band, which means fortunate. So the boy was called Banda. And Shiva now was feeling really very generous towards this boy because he wanted to make it right. He had unnecessarily burned down Manmada. So Shiva granted him a boon that he can rule for 60,000 years. And the boy was really happy. Now, Banda was born out of the ashes that was originally Manmada. Manmada is the god of love and he is sattvic. But because this ashes has the anger of Rudra, because of that he had demon nature. So he was Banda Asura. And now he is a demon and he was given a boon that he could rule for 60,000 years and he would be very powerful. That power got to his head and now he became another demon who was torturing everybody, controlling the three worlds, and he was really becoming. So now Devas had additional problem of Bhaṇḍāsura. And they didn't know what to do. And already one plan of going to Shiva failed. So this time, in order to get some relief from Bhaṇḍāsura, the Devas did a yajna. And they did sacrifice. And they were praying, hoping that some god would come and help them and put an end to this Bhaṇḍāsura. They kept on praying and it went for a very long time. And there was nothing happening. It was continuing like that. All the devas became very dejected. Finally, they said, you know what? Nobody's coming to help us. At least, let's all jump into the fire and that will put an end to our misery. So all the devas decided to jump into the fire. At that time, out of the fire came Lalita. And when they saw Lalita rise out of it, everybody knew that she had come to save them. So they all praised her, and they all said that she was their queen and that they would follow her. So that's how Lalita came from the fire pit. And once Lalita came from the fire pit, she was the most beautiful woman. And they said that she would be their queen. And therefore, they went ahead, they called Vishwakarma, who's the architect of the Devas. And he came and they built a very beautiful city, Srinagara, which we saw in the previous one. Built an amazing palace, and they installed Lalita as their queen there. And then now Brahma was thinking, this is the most beautiful woman and she has come to help, but she cannot be alone. She always needs to be with someone. And they were thinking, who can be good enough for Lalita? And after much thought, Brahma thought only Shiva can come anywhere close to Lalita. And it'll be nice if Shiva marries Lalita. But Brahma was thinking, Shiva is with mated hair, he wears the skull garland, and he has ashes on his body, and he doesn't look very pleasing. Whereas Lalita, if you see, she is Tripura Sundari, she is so beautiful, and she is equally independent and bold also. And the independence and boldness was what made him think of Shiva. But he was thinking about the physical appearance. At that time, Shiva took form as Kameshwara. And as Kameshwara, he was the most handsome man. He was like several thousand Manmadas put together. So he came in this most pleasing form. And when Lalita saw him, she liked him. And when Kameshwara saw Lalita, he couldn't take his eyes off of her. So they both liked each other. And so they got married. And Vishnu was there. And Vishnu is in the capacity of her brother. He did the panigraha. And so Lalita and Shiva were married. Kameshwara were married. And they have a daughter called Bala, who is 9 years old. So at that time, now she's ruling over this city. All the devas and Brahma came to her and said, now please help us and get rid of this Bhaṇḍāsura. So at that time, Lalita is going to the war. And that's where these shlokas start. So Lalita gathered an army of Shaktis. And she started to put all this together. So there were several crores of these Shaktis. And so there was a completely female army that decided to go and fight Bhaṇḍāsura. And if you look at the army, generally there is a single unit called Patti. That's the smallest unit of the army. A Patti usually has one chariot, one elephant, 3 horses, and 5 soldiers. So that's the smallest unit. And then 22,870 such pattis make a akshauhini. So generally in a akshauhini, there are at least 100,000 foot soldiers and there are at least 22,000 chariots. So any army will comprise of chariots, elephant army, horses army, which is the cavalry, and foot soldiers. So similar to that, Lalita's army also had all these pieces. So Lalita was in a chariot, and her chariot is called chakrarāja. And it is not just any chariot. The chakrarāja is several miles long. The chariot is so big that it's several miles long. And it has 9 steps, and in each step there were several Shaktis who were stationed. And Bala and Lalita were in that chariot. And then Lalita has a prime minister. Her name is mantriṇī. And so mantriṇī was the prime minister, and she had the geyachakra. And then Lalita's commander of the army is daṇḍanāthā. So daṇḍanāthā has girichakhra. And there was sampatkarī, who was the leader of the elephant army. And then there is aśhvārūḍha, who is the leader of the cavalry. So she has several crores horses. So with all of this in place, Lalita's army started to move towards the capital city of Bhaṇḍāsura, which is called Shunyaka. And every king has lots of spies. So obviously, if somebody is coming to attack Shunyaka, Bhaṇḍāsura's spies got to know about it, and they went and told Bhaṇḍāsura's brothers. He has two brothers, Vishukra and Visanga. So he went and told those two brothers, and so they got to know about this entirely female army showing up. And so both of them decided to go let Bhaṇḍāsura know. At that time, as Lalita's army started to move towards, there was earthquakes and all these bad omens coming up, which was striking fear in the hearts of the people who lived there. So Vishukra and Vishanga went to Bhaṇḍāsura's palace, and in the court where he was with all the generals, they went and said, we've gotten news that there is a female army that's coming. And Vishukra explained that, this seems to be someone who just came out of a fire pit, and she is supposed to be very beautiful and delicate, but she has no prior experience in a war. And I'm very surprised. The Devas, even Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, everybody fought with us and they couldn't win and they ran away from the battle. Now it looks like these Devas are so desperate that they are sending a bunch of women, and she's coming with an entirely female army. There is no man there, which seems really strange. And he says, after we've fought all of these people, I don't know why we would fight a bunch of women. Maybe we should just send a bunch of servants who work in our palace to go deal with these women. And so he told Bhaṇḍāsura that. And Vishanga is a little bit more thoughtful about it. And what Vishanga said is, all he said is true. This lady doesn't have any experience. But regardless, we should not just underestimate any enemy. If somebody is coming and attacking our city, we should prepare for it like a battle. So we should not take it lightly. We have heard about a lot of Shaktis before, so let's not take it easy. Let's still treat it like a battle. I completely agree that, this is just a woman army and it may not be a match for the Asura army. Hearing this, Bhaṇḍāsura was like, who can win over Bhaṇḍāsura's army? We are so good, and this is after all a woman who has no experience. Let's, why are you scared, Vishanga? Why are you worrying about this? Don't worry. But I will take your words because you said we should treat it like a battle. Let's go get one of our generals and send them. So, first thing what they did is they sent a general called Durmada. And he took a big army and he went to fight the Shakti army. And when he went to fight, Sampatkarī, who is the leader of the elephant army, started to fight with him, and she killed him. Sampatkarī killed Durmada, which actually was really surprising. And the people who were in the battlefield, some of the Asuras who didn't die, when they went back, they said, no, these Shaktis are all very vigorous and they have lots of powers. So let's not try to take them easy. They seem very vigorous. So then they thought, let's send Kuranda. Kuranda is Durmada's brother. And they said, let's send Kuranda. He is a very able general. So let him go fight. So Kuranda also went and he took 20 Akshahinis, such a big army. And he took that and he went and fought, and he was killed by aśhvārūḍha. Then they were a bit surprised, and the people who came back said, these Shaktis have lots of powers, so it's not just that they are physically capable, they also have lots of powers. So then they thought, let's fight that and make sure that we show our magical prowess as well. So Bhaṇḍāsura now sent 5 generals, and along with those generals, he sent a Maya Sarpini. Sarpini means serpent. So they sent, and this Sarpini was able to create crores of other serpents, and these serpents were blowing poison gas, the halakala visham. They were able to blow that, and so it was really impacting the Shaktis, and they couldn't fight as well as they fought in the other two. At that time, there was a Shakti called Nakuli. Nakuli took the form of a mongoose and she rode on Garuda, and she went and she was able to, from the mongoose form, she was able to create so many other mongoose, and all these mongoose bit the serpents. And there was this terrible fight between the serpents and the mongoose and the shaktis and the asuras. There was blood flowing everywhere. There's 20 akshahinis. So the battlefield became really gross. And at that time, the asuras were also, the serpents were also pretty powerful. At one point, the mongoose could no longer move forward. At that time, Nakuli put a Garuda missile, which then killed all the other serpents. And with that, all the generals and the entire army was destroyed. So then when they went back, Bhaṇḍāsura for the second time sent 7 generals with 30 akshahinis. So now bigger army, more generals, and he sent them there. But this time around, these generals are expert in black magic. So now they were able to bring ghosts and Vedalas and everybody. And these generals also had performed some penance to the sun. And through that, they got a very peculiar boon, or a specific one, where whomever they look at, that person will become immobile. That means they'll just freeze. So these 7 generals, when they came to the battlefield, the moment they looked at the Shaktis, even though they were all waiting to fight with them, they couldn't move. They were all bound, just like that. And now these generals were, the Asura army was able to hurt everybody. So this got really worrisome, and then they all prayed to Lalita. So at that time, there was a Shakti called Tiraskarnika. And what she did is, she is the bodyguard of daṇḍanāthā. So she came and she put a missile called Andha. Andha means blindness. So she put that missile, which then made all the generals blind. And therefore, they could no longer immobilize the Shaktis. And so then the army was also killed. So at that time, when they went back, Bhaṇḍāsura, after the 7 generals were also slain, then they thought, if we keep fighting this, 5 generals, then 7 generals, this is not going to work out very well. So Bhaṇḍāsura said, my spies have told me that there is a lady called Lalita, and she is always at the rear, and all the Shaktis are only fighting the war. I think the best way to end this war is to go attack Lalita and capture her. Then these Shaktis will not have a leader, so we can bring the war to an end. So Bhaṇḍāsura called Vishanga, and he said, Vishanga, you take a small army in the night time, wear all your black cloaks and go and attack Lalita. And he said, this is how Lalita looks, and she's always in the rear. And all these other people are in the front. So if you attack her in the rear, we can succeed. And so Vishanga took a smaller army. Even then it was many akshahinis. So he took that army. They all wore their cloaks, and it was all dark, and already asuras are very dark. So nighttime, all the Shaktis were all sleeping, and suddenly in the dark, these demons started attacking the Shakti army. And the Shakti army was completely surprised, and the arrows were flying from all sides, and they were all getting hurt. And the one thing with asuras is, in the night time, they are more powerful. So they are able to fight well, and they didn't realize what to do. And this was also, the attack was happening from the back. And so at that time, mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā are in the front. So only Lalita is there with all the Nitya deities in the 9 steps. And one of the arrows hits the Lalita's step, and one of the fans gets damaged. As soon as they saw that, the Nitya deities get very mad. So they ask Lalita for permission to go fight, because now it's their job to protect Lalita. So Lalita gives them that permission. So they all start to fight with the demons. And they quickly realize that the darkness is aiding this demons. So there is a Nitya deity called Vahnivasini. Vahnivasini is the one who controls when the moon comes and when the sun comes. So she made sure that the sun would rise. And then there is also another deity called jvālāmālini, who's capable of creating a fire. So between jvālāmālini and Vakhnivasini, they made sure that the camp had enough light, and with that the Shaktis were able to see, and they started to fight. And then when Nitya deity called, Vakhnivasini called for the sun, when sun started to show up, then they realized that they were all exposed. The demons realized that they were all exposed, and so they ran away. And Lalita told the Shaktis to stop fighting them, because it's not fair to fight with someone who's running away or retreating from the battlefield. So they let them go. So the next morning they saw this, and already all the generals were all no match for the army. So now this time the sons of Bhaṇḍāsura came to the battlefield. So Bhaṇḍāsura has 30 sons. They all came to the battlefield to fight. And Bala, who is the daughter of Lalita, was looking at all of this. And once she heard that Bhaṇḍāsura's sons are coming to fight, she told Lalita that she wants to go and fight in the battle. And she said it's only fair that the Bhaṇḍāsura's sons are fought by the daughter of Lalita. But she's only a 9-year-old girl. Even though she's very well versed with martial arts, she's very good at archery. She's just a young girl. So Lalita said, no, you're just very young, don't have to go. But she said, no. Looking at how they are doing, how they are playing this, and they attack us from rear in the night, and these are all not rules. Now I feel like I need to get into the battlefield. So Lalita gave her permission, and mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā were very worried. But Bala didn't have her own army. So she used the same Lalita army. And she went to the battlefield and she fought with the sons of Bhaṇḍāsura. The sons of Bhaṇḍāsura were a bit surprised. They did not expect a 9-year-old little girl. And once they started seeing her fight, they realized that she is not someone you can take lightly. And so there was a very big fight between the two. And what they all realized, the Bhaṇḍāsura's sons, for each one she was appearing as a different person. So they were all fighting. At one point, Bala put one arrow that became 30 arrows and hit all the 30 sons at once. And they all died, and the army was also destroyed there. So once Bhaṇḍāsura heard about all the 30 sons dying, he became very sad and he was crying. And he couldn't believe that he lost all his 30 sons at once. At that time, some of the remaining generals and Vishukra and Vishanga told him that it's not, you shouldn't be crying over your son's death. They all died courageously in the battlefield, and that's the best way to go. But what we need to do now is take revenge on these people for killing all the generals and doing this. And they said, these guys seem to be really powerful, and they're even countering all the magic. So we have to do something so that we bring an end to this war. So saying that, what they decided, this Vishukra has lots of magical power. So they decided to find a shortcut. And the next night also, Vishukra took a whole bunch of people with him, and he wanted to go and fight. In the meantime, when the night attack happened, mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā were terribly worried that in the night time they're coming and attacking, and that especially Lalita was in a place where arrows could get into her chariot. So they were worried and they were asking Lalita what to do. So Lalita had asked jvālāmālini to create a ring around the camp. So there was a fortress and the army was within that fortress. So there was only a small opening for people to get out. Otherwise, the entire camp was surrounded by this fire. Nobody can cross that fire. So the next night when Vishukra went to try and fight with them, he realized that no matter what they did, there was this ring of fire that was protecting the camp. So they couldn't do what they did the last night. They couldn't go and fight with. So because of that, he has lots of magical power. So what he did is he created a yantra. Yantra is an instrument, and he infused it with mantra. And the objective of that yantra is to create dejection. And so now he has this magical yantra with him, and he was trying to find a way to somehow get it into the camp. And he threw it through in that small opening, Luckily for him, that yantra landed inside the camp. And as soon as the yantra landed inside the camp, all these Shaktis started to get the effect of that yantra. And they all started to feel dejected. They were wondering why they're fighting this war, what's in it for them, and if Lalita and Bhaṇḍāsura have to fight, now they're the ones who are getting killed. This mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā are leading them to this war and getting them wounded, and they're getting killed. So they all started to feel very dejected. And so sometime around midnight, they started to work. And mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā were the only two Shaktis who were not impacted by this Vigna Yantra, because they are very powerful deities. They're only second to Lalita, so nothing happened to them. So it became morning, and so mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā were trying to get their armies ready for the next day's battle. They realized all the Shaktis were very lazy and lethargic. All of them are dejected, and none of them want to come to fight to the battle. And they're asking questions like, who's Lalita? Why should we go and listen to whatever she's saying? So mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā got very worried. So they went to Lalita and they said, this is happening. None of our Shaktis want to come and fight. So once Lalita thought about it a little while, and then she realized, there is a Vigna Yantra somewhere here. So Lalita then mentally thought about Kameshwara. And as she thought about Kameshwara, a form originated in reality, that was Ganesha. So just by thinking about Kameshwara, she got Ganesha. And then Ganesha prayed to Lalita and said, Mom, what do you want me to do? And then Lalita said, somewhere here there is a Vigna Yantra. Please go destroy that Vigna Yantra. So Ganesha went and he searched for the Vigna Yantra, and once he found it, he smashed it into pieces and it became powder. As soon as the Vigna Yantra was smashed, the Shaktis all came back to normal, and they were all ready, and they went to the battlefield. So this Vishukra threw this Vigna Yantra and went and thought nobody will come to the battle the next day, but unfortunately for him, all the Shaktis showed up. So that day, Vishukra and Vishanga both came to the battlefield, and they started to fight. And Vishukra continued to use all his magical power. And when it was almost towards the end of the day, Vishukra put a thirst missile. So all the Shaktis became very thirsty, and it impacted their ability to fight the battle. And mantriṇī and daṇḍanāthā spoke about it, and immediately they called Sura Sindhu, the ocean of liquor. And then once the ocean of liquor came, they, like rain clouds, liquor was splashed to all the Shaktis, and jvālāmālini created a fortress around them, so that liquor is only available to the Shaktis and not to the demons. And so once all the Shaktis drank that liquor, they became energized, and they also, liquor has the ability to excite all the senses, and now they are really wanting to fight this war and deal with this army. So the Shaktis were able to fight with vigor. And then the fight continued, and mantriṇī was able to, kill Visanga, and daṇḍanāthā, who's also called as Varahi, she killed Vishukra. So now both the brothers are also dead. So now Bhaṇḍāsura, his sons were gone, his army is almost decimated, and then his two brothers are also dead. So Bhaṇḍāsura decided to come and fight. And Bhaṇḍāsura is a great warrior. He is he is the leader of the three worlds. So he had that power to go conquer three worlds. So as he started to come towards the battlefield, the Shaktis felt a fear in them. And then Lalita realized now is the time for her to come to the battlefield directly. So once Bhaṇḍāsura showed up, Lalita also came to the battle. And there was a terrible fight between Lalita and Bhaṇḍāsura for 12 hours. Bhaṇḍāsura has several missiles, and he is capable of a lot of magic. And for every missile that Bhaṇḍāsura put, Lalita countered it with another missile. So Bhaṇḍāsura put a missile of great darkness. Then Lalita countered it with a missile of sun. He put a missile of great death. It's called Antaka, and then Lalita responded with the missile of Mrityunjaya, the Shiva's mantra, where it can conquer death. And then there was also Bhaṇḍāsura had a missile called Sarva Asura Astra, which means it's all the demons who were creating so much havoc throughout the many centuries and yugas. So that's everybody from from the Matsya onwards, all the demons. So to counter that, from her 10 fingernails came the 10 avatars of Narayana. So with that, she was able to counter that. Then Lalita put the Mahapāshupatastra. Once she put the Mahapāshupatastra, Bhaṇḍāsura's army was completely destroyed. And then finally, she used the Kāmeshvara Astra, which destroyed Bhaṇḍāsura and his capital city of Sunyaka. So then all the gods were very happy that Bhaṇḍāsura is now dead, and that there will be no more torture. And so then when she returned to the Srinagara, Rati, who is the wife of Manmada, came, and she looked grief-stricken because now Manmada is gone. Bhaṇḍāsura was nothing but Manmada's reincarnation, and now Manmada has no body. And so Rati was crying, and everybody explained to Lalita what had happened, and Lalita was very compassionate, and with one look from her eye, Manmada was revived. So Manmada, once he came back, he prayed to Lalita, and he said, you can use me in any form that you want. And so Lalita asked him to be the enchanter of all the living beings, and he would be invisible, so nobody can see him. Only Rati can see him. And in the new form, he was more handsome than he was before, but only Rati can see him. So, Lalita granted him the boon that nobody will be, nobody will be able to resist his arrows. Even Shiva himself will fall under the spell of his arrows. So she gave him that boon. And then, he put that arrow on Shiva, and Shiva fell in love with Parvati, and Parvati also liked him. And then for them, Skanda was born. And once Skanda was born, he took care of Tarakasura. So that's how this the story goes. And if you look at the shlokas that we saw, devarśhi gaṇasaṅghāta stūyamānāthma vaibhavā. That means all the devas, rishis, and the ganas came and praised her and asked for her help. Bhaṇḍāsura vadhodyukta śaktisenā samanvitā. So in order to destroy Bhaṇḍāsura, along with the army of Shaktis, she proceeded forward. Sampatkarī samārūḍha sindhura vrajasevitā. So Sampatkarī is responsible for the elephant army. Sindhura means elephant. aśhvārūḍhādhiśhṭhitāśva koṭikoṭi bhirāvṛtā. So aśhvārūḍha is the person responsible for the cavalry. So she is surrounded by lots of horses. Koṭikoṭi bhirāvṛtā means crores of horses. So she has such a big army. Chakrarāja rathārūḍha sarvāyudha pariśhkṛtā. So chakrarāja is the chariot of Lalita, and she had sarvāyudha pariśkṛtā. She had every possible weapon in her chariot. Geyachakra rathārūḍha mantriṇī parisevitā. So Mantriṇī, who is the prime minister of Lalita, had the geyachakra chariot. And geyachakra had 8 steps. Girichakhra rathārūḍha daṇḍanāthā puraskṛtā. Daṇḍanāthā is the commander of the army. She's also called Varahi, and she went on the girichakhra chariot, and that has 5 steps. And all of these steps, the Shaktis are all stationed. jvālāmālini kākśhipta vahniprākāra madhyagā. So jvālāmālini created a fortress, and the army stayed within that fortress. Bhaṇḍasainya vadhodyukta shakti vikrama harshita. So the different Shaktis fought really well with the Bhaṇḍasura's army. Nitya Parakramaṭopa Nirikṣana Samutsuka. So when the Nitya Devis protected Lalita, she was very pleased. She was very happy with the valor that was displayed by all these Shaktis. Bandaputra vadhodyukta Bala Vikramanandita. So Bala destroyed the sons of Bhaṇḍasura, Bandaputra. Mantriṇyamba virachita Vishanga vadadoshita. So mantriṇī destroyed Vishanga. Vishukra pranaharana Varahi viryanandita. Vishukra was destroyed by Varahi, who is daṇḍanāthā. Kameshvara Mukaloka Kalpita Shri Ganeshvara. Just by thinking about Kameshvara, she was able to manifest Ganesha. Mahaganesha Nirbinna Vignayantra Praharshita. So Ganesha destroyed the Vignayantra. Bhaṇḍasurendra Nirmukta Shastra Pratyastra Varshini. So in fighting with Bhaṇḍasura, for every missile that he put, she was able to counter that missile. That's why Shastra. Shastra means Astram. Pratyastra means counter missile. So she was able to do that, and it's Varshini. So it was not just one after the other. Rather, the missiles were raining. It was for 12 hours. There was a very intense fight that was happening. Karanguli Nakotpanna Narayana Dashakritihi. So when Bhaṇḍasura put the Sarva Asura Astra, she, with her 10 nails, she brought about the 10 incarnations of Narayana. Mahapashupatastragni Nirdagdasura Sainika. See, Lalita used the Pashupatastra in order to destroy the army of Bhaṇḍasura. Kameshwarastra Nirdagda Sabandasura Shunyaka. So she used the Kameshwara Astra in order to kill Bhaṇḍasura and destroy his capital city called Shunyaka. Brahmopendra Mahendradi Deva Samstuta vaibhavā. So all the Devas, including Brahma, everybody came and praised her for destroying Bhaṇḍasura. Hara Netragni Sandagda Kama Sanjeevan Aushadhihi. So Hara is Shiva. Hara Netra Agni. Sandagda. So the Manmada, Kama is Manmada. So Manmada, who was burnt by the fire from the eyes of Shiva, was revived by Lalita, and he became a Sanjeevi. Even though he has an invisible form, he lives forever. The last line here, Srimad Vagbhava Kūtaika Swarupa Mukha Pankaja. It is part of the Panchadasi mantra. We'll look at it next time. But the whole battle ends with Kama being, Manmada being revived and being alive now. And actually you might think, the war ends with Bhaṇḍasura slaying. But why does it go all the way up to Manmada being revived? So if you look at this entire story of Lalita fighting Bhaṇḍasura, the story meaning really is Bhaṇḍasura actually signifies our need for more and more. So if you look at Bhaṇḍasura, he is truly Manmada. If you look at Manmada, he is a god of love and desire. Without Manmada, there is no creation in the universe. And he is the god of love, which means that you do things for others. But when that same Manmada was burnt and became Bhaṇḍasura, if you look at him, he was so greedy. His whole focus was to establish that he was most powerful. And even when Shiva told him, you will rule for 60,000 years, even then he had this need to prove his superiority, and he always wanted more, right? And in that superiority complex or inflated ego, he did not even realize who he was up against. So this is the reality for most of us, right? And this is what we call as Anavamala. Anavamala is there is an inherent sense of lack in us, and we always try to fill it with something. It could be money, it could be attachment, it could be anything, but we always fill with it. So Bhaṇḍasura represents that, and Lalita with her army is coming and destroying that inflated ego or this superiority complex. And that's where all these, so aśhvārūḍha, if you see horses, it's always compared to the mind, right? The mind is always controlled by the senses. If you leave your mind to running after the senses, then there is no end to that cycle. So that's where there is aśhvārūḍha who comes in and who helps us control our senses, and therefore through that control our mind. And when our mind is very clear, then we don't have this inflated sense of ego or anything. But if you see with Lalita, it's not just that she's trying to help us get rid of our ego or fill the void, and that's where the Kāmeshvara Astra, when the capital city of Shunyaka, Shunyam means void, you cannot fill anything in that. But when the Kāmeshvara Astra infused it with light, that's where we recognize who we are in reality. And that's where the Manmada is brought back to life. So when Manmada is brought back to life, that Bhaṇḍāsura recognized his true self, who he is, and he is essentially the god of love. So the whole idea of this Lalita Sahasranama, destroying our ego, is only a means to an end. But the real goal of Lalita Sahasranama is that we recognize the God that resides in us, and that can be in the form of compassion, in the form of love for other people, to recognize the oneness that we have with the entire universe, and recognize that Devi resides in our heart. So that is the true goal of Lalita Sahasranamam, and all the stories around that are just a different way of conveying that truth, because just explaining it in an abstract format will not resonate with most of the people. So these stories come together to show us that. So with this set, we have covered the war between Lalita and Bhaṇḍāsura, and we will cover the other sections about Kundalini in the next one. Thank you.